The Ballerina farm story has taken over the internet. Here's a quick recap in case you missed it. Hannah Neeleman, otherwise known as the original TRAD wife influencer, had a controversial feature written on her by the Sunday Times. For context, a TRAD wife is a woman who embraces traditional gender roles, particularly in the home. In the Sunday Times feature, the author asked if Neeleman was exhibiting, quote, the ultimate act of empowerment or the ultimate demonstration of oppression. In another paragraph, the author writes Neeleman's husband, quote, wanted to live in the great western wilds, so they did. He wanted to farm, so they do. The only space earmarked to be Neeleman's own ended up becoming the kids' schoolroom. And then, in another paragraph, the author writes, I can't, it seems, get an answer out of Neeleman without her being corrected, interrupted, or answered for by either her husband or a child.
After the article blew up into a social media debate over whether the piece was fair, Neeleman responded herself with this video. Let's watch.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a reporter come into our home to learn more about our family and business. We thought the interview went really well, very similar to the dozens of interviews we had done in recent memory. We were taken back, however, when we saw the printed article, which shocked us and shocked the world by being an attack on our family and my marriage, portraying me as oppressed, with my husband being the culprit. This couldn't be further from the truth. Nothing we said in the interview implied this conclusion, which leads me to believe the angle taken was predetermined. For Daniel and I, our priority in life is God and family. Everything else comes second. The greatest day of my life was when Daniel and I were married 13 years ago. Together we have built a business from scratch. We've brought 8 children into this world and have prioritized our marriage all along the way. We are co-parents, co-CEOs, co-diaper changers, kitchen cleaners, and decision makers. We are one. And I love him more today than I did 13 years ago.
All right, so there you have it, her official response. And the author of the original Times feature has written a follow-up piece talking about the backlash and debate that has ensued from her profile. I want to start by getting your thoughts because this is our first time hosting together. I don't know how you feel about this. Do you believe what she's saying in her response video?
I believe she believes what she is saying in her response video. Do I believe she understands internalized misogyny and how important it is that you're not spoken over, especially in front of a reporter? I mean, that I think, granted, I'm taking the reporter's word as true, and I do believe that there's a strict, they record. You're a reporter, You pull out a recorder, you're on a trip like this, you want to make sure everything's on the record. And also, as someone who's being interviewed, you should be doing the same thing. So if there were specific things that they did not think were true, there needs to be an open discussion about that, about reporting. I think that's a question about reporting and not about perspective. If they thought it wasn't misogynistic, that the husband was talking over her the entire time, then maybe we need to examine how we look at misogyny. And that's what I really think the story is about, is how she interprets misogyny and how she doesn't.
Well, I would be curious to know, again, if it's the reporter's interpretation that he was speaking over her or if they were doing sort of a joint interview type of situation, because there has been audio that has been released by Ballerina Farm where the reporter described one of the incidents as her being really quiet when she talked about getting medication during one of her birthing of one of her births. And the perception that the reporter got was that she was speaking quietly because she didn't want her husband to know that she had not had a natural birth. But when you go back and look at what Ballerina Farm shared, it was that her husband had taken a phone call in the middle of the conversation and she lowered her voice so that she wasn't interrupting him, which is a very different way of describing that situation than what the reporter did. So to me, what this seems is like this woman is being accused of being oppressed. She speaks out for herself and says that she's not oppressed and she's very happy with her lifestyle. And yet we're still questioning whether or not she's oppressed because she might have internalized misogyny. Do you think that denies her agency in some ways?
No, I think she should be able to speak out. I think that's the point of this conversation, right? But she's also advocating, aside from maybe some minor disagreements over how the reporting went down, she's also advocating for this lifestyle, advocating to surrender her own agency unless it's in relationship with influencers or doing it on the terms that her husband sets. She's choosing the trad wife lifestyle, which, in my home, and I came from a Greek household, Traditional wives did not listen to every single thing that their husband told them to do.
But we don't know if she listens to every single thing her husband tells her to do. This is a projection of her relationship as outsiders.
But she's also very active and open on social media. So some of this is also just by watching her social media and the trad wife social media, following God. Well, what does God say? I mean, how is it determined when you say we live for God, we live for religion? Well, what form of religion? Is this that the traditional biblical sense in that the woman is to respond to every single thing that the
Well, that's not what
says?
the traditional biblical sense is. I think that's a misrepresentation of Christianity. It is true that husbands are supposed to be the faith leaders of the household, but women play an equally important complementary role, and that has always been the traditional household in terms of a biblical sense. I'm a very devout Catholic, so I do this with my husband. I absolutely listen to things that he tells me to in the home, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a voice or have some agency in the relationship. But I think it's damaging to actually tell women who want to live this way that their lifestyle is a form of them accepting internalized misogyny or choosing oppression or not allowing themselves to reach their full potential. I mean, I have to say, just even as a working woman, the happiest that I am is when I make my husband a meal. There's something deeply satisfying. Right, and this is her. So, I mean, who are you, frankly, to tell her that she is not fully opting into this lifestyle with full clarity and acknowledgement of her beliefs?
Well, I think it's what she represents. Just as we critique all types of influencers out there, from the Kardashians and plastic surgeries and reality show stars, this is also a version of that. She is out there influencing to younger women. It's a little bit easier this way. Why don't you just surrender? You can take care of the kids, focus on makeup, focus on cooking and cleaning, maybe have some help. But the reality is you don't have to go out there in that tough little workforce out there. It's so difficult. You don't have to get an education. That is what she's influencing. You are striking a balance, and kudos to you. And I strike a different balance, which is I would like to live in a matriarchy where we're all just running the world all day long. And that is going to happen. But for her, she is playing a very important role in social media, when social media is impacting so many young women and so many young boys out there. And I think I'm even more concerned about the young boys and how they interpret how women should be treated and how women should play a role in the world. And you see that in social media trends, where young boys are now becoming more conservative for the first time in history than previous generations since they've been recording this. And they're becoming Republicans at a faster rate, and they're taking on those more conservative gender roles. I mean, that is a choice, but it is also an influence campaign that is happening, and she just happens to be a very notable influencer.
She is. I would dispute the idea that she says that it's easier to live her lifestyle. I do consume a lot of her content. I've never heard her say that. And then I would also say that the reason her content is so popular is that it's not just men who want to return to a more traditional lifestyle, but a lot of women too. And I think we should allow them the opportunity to make that choice for themselves if that's what they want to do. I mean, we have seen women becoming unhappier every single year. We have record rates of anxiety and depression. We saw a record number of women leave the workforce during the pandemic, a lot of them expressing a desire to stay home with their children and become homemakers. I think that's totally valid. And, in terms of her influence on young women, why is her influence more damaging than someone who says your career is your end-all be-all, that will 100% leave you being fulfilled and happy and you don't need anything else? I mean, these are both two extremes, right?
They are, but one thing that we're keeping out is they are very wealthy. I mean, her husband is the JetBlue heir.
Sure.
So not everybody has that choice. I mean, part of the reason why you see so many women entering the workforce historically is because life has just gotten more expensive. Our generation is burdened by a tremendous amount of student loan debt. Women are now in universities at a higher rate, much higher rate than boys are. Men, I should say, going to school. We're more educated. We're getting better jobs. And part of that is just because society is more expensive. So while this fantasy seems very cute, what it is doing is it's actually hurting our economy, frankly. I mean, if men are not going to university at the rate that they have previously, and women are taking on that burden, and women are the ones who have to be more educated, get better jobs, then how are the men going to take care of their wives in this trad wife lifestyle if they don't have educations and jobs?
Well, and this is actually a very good point, because I think this is why the Republican Party in particular has become more economically populist, because they have been very critical of the two-income trap, where it is more expensive to raise a, let's say, 4-person family, to raise children, for women to be able to stay home. And so I think that's a legitimate criticism. Daycare is obviously very expensive. But I don't think that the idea that it hurts the economy for women to stay home is a useful argument, because my perspective would be that I'm okay with the economy taking a hit if it means more women get to stay home and raise their children, right? I think that's a fair trade-off.
Why can't men do that?
They could.
I mean, they should be doing that. I mean, the funny thing is
allowed
now
to.
they're not educated, they're not getting the jobs, and they don't know how to take care of kids. Generally speaking, I know I'm going to get pushback on that, but the majority of men have not been conditioned to take care of the home, and that's just how our society operates. But I'm going to push back on you, because back in the Rosie the Riveter days, that was the message, is that if we want to keep our economy afloat, women, you got to get out in the workforce. And that worked until the 50s, and especially when the Christian Coalition started to take power, to go back to these traditional roles. I mean, this is how our country operated as recent as 60, 70 years ago.
Right, but that was in a very specific context of building up industrialization during World War II. And you know, I would also say that, to your point about men staying home, men are allowed to stay home. Nobody's saying they can't. But there is a lot of research that shows, especially in the first 3 years of a child's life, that a mother's influence in the home is deeply important for their health and their development, even more so than the father. The father is more important a little bit later in the child's life. Not to say that they shouldn't be there during a child's early years, but there is a formative relationship that takes place with the mother that simply cannot be replaced by a man.
How about we have a balance? I mean, I think that is essentially, you know, people who think that feminism is about replacing men, I think it's about balance, personally, from my perspective, that, you know, there's so many reports at this point, it's jarring about how much extra labor women put in on top of their jobs. So it's not just that you're out there getting a job, but you come home and you're doing more labor with childcare, with obviously household duties that really should be paid for that as well. So, you know, it's about balancing the household out, I believe. But in terms of, you know, how a child is raised and the psychological effect of having a mother in the home, of course that's important. And no one's saying that should be denied. We're just saying, you know, don't surrender all of your freedoms and choices in life by responding to your billionaire heir husband and how he wants to do things and move out in the wind, whatever the open winds, whatever that thing was called.
Yeah, I imagine she probably feels quite empowered by her lifestyle, and maybe she feels more free being able to surrender herself to her family and take care of her children. A lot of people find great purpose in that, but I think we're going to have to agree to disagree. We're
It helps
leave
when you have
it there.
$1 billion, I got to say that.
Oh, it does help. Anything helps when you have $1 billion, but we're going to be back with more Rising after this.